So before this video continues, I want to make it very clear that I am an advocate against pornography. And this video that I am making, a video response to a woman who is also an advocate of pornography. However, this response that I'm making to this woman is, I believe, important, mainly because this woman here, an advocate against pornography, I believe, is very ignorant and very stupid. And also sexist at the same time. But please, before you judge me because I personally am against pornography, hear what I have to say, hear me out, because I'm not going to be dealing with my personal convictions. I promise you that I'm not going to approach this topic like you think I'm going to approach it. So let's begin.
Hi everyone, my name is Dawn Hawkins. I'm the Executive Director of Morality and Media. I direct a number of anti-pornography campaigns, and I just wanted to share with you my experience from the weekend. I'm kind of emotional about it still, so bear with me. So I was heading to Texas from DC. I was asked to speak at a conference about the links between pornography and sex trafficking. And I boarded my flight in Baltimore at 6 a.m. on Friday, only to find that the man sitting in front of me was looking at pornography on his iPad. Of all people to be sitting in front of, he was right in front of me. I was speechless, I was stunned, I didn't know what to say, I could not believe he was looking at pornography right there on the airplane at 6 a.m. in the morning.
So my first question is, why? Why are you surprised? Why are you shocked? People look at pornography at all times of the day, so I'm not sure why you're so shocked that he's looking at pornography at exactly 6 a.m. And it shocks me that you're shocked that somebody's looking at pornography on a plane. I don't know why you're shocked, but it's honestly shocking me that you're so shocked about it, if that makes sense.
So I sat back for enough time for him to flip through about 8 images. They were all of very, very young girls. I couldn't tell if they were 14 or 18. They were definitely young, and they were all Asian, and a couple of the photographs were very violent in nature. One of them even had one girl whipping the other girl with a whip.
This makes me wonder if you know anything about fetishes. People dress up when they're having sex, or they do things to have sex that really turns them on. Some of those things are whipping. Other examples involve being tied, like handcuffs and tied to a bed, and stuff like that. Just because they have a whip and they're doing pornography, lesbian on lesbian, and they're whipping each other, that does not necessarily mean it is true actual violence. Can lesbians or people doing pornography be violent? Yes, absolutely. But to assume that they are violently beating one another is a very wrong assumption that you just made.
As soon as I gathered myself, I couldn't help it. I definitely said something. Somewhat loudly, I asked him if he was really looking at pornography at that time. I said, is that really pornography? Are you looking at pornography right now on this airplane? Are those girls even 18? Is that child pornography?
Okay, why would you ask such a stupid question? Just earlier you said he was looking at pornography. So why would you ask him, are you really looking at pornography? You just described that he scrolled through 8 photos and then there was 2 women beating each other with whips or whatever. That's not pornography? Then why ask the stupid question, are you looking at pornography? That's like a rhetorical question.
I was making a fairly big deal about it, and everyone seemed to be looking at us. The guy said, you don't know what you're talking about. He was still holding the iPad right in front of him, and I said, I do. I can see your screen right now. You're looking at porn.
If he's looking at porn, why did you ask him if he's looking at porn? Oh my goodness. Gosh.
And I turned around. There was a flight attendant right behind me, a male flight attendant, and I said to him, sir, this man is looking at pornography. Will you please do something about it? The flight attendant just stood there. He did nothing. He said there was nothing that he could do. He could have just asked the man to put it away and to not look at it. I was astounded. I couldn't believe that he refused to do anything, especially because it was making me and other passengers so uncomfortable. And I'm sure that it was making the other passengers uncomfortable as well.
Actually, I'm fairly confident it wasn't making the other passengers uncomfortable, because no one knew that he was looking at pornography until you brought it up, until you made the big scene that he was looking at pornography. And since when have airlines or airplane people cared about other people being comfortable unless you're in first class? Honestly.
Anyway, the guy put it away. I was sitting there shaking. I was so upset. A few minutes later, I leaned forward and in a much quieter voice directed just at the man, I said to him, "Sir, I'm heading right now to speak at a conference about pornography and sex trafficking. You're contributing to the problem. You're exploiting millions of women and children. You're creating the demand. You're the one contributing to all of this harm."
Unless this guy paid for the pornography on his iPad, he's therefore not creating a demand if he's not paying money for it. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to find pornography. You can find pornography by just searching Google. You can find hundreds of cam websites and websites displaying pornography completely free, not having to pay for it at all. And secondly, I do agree on the fact that pornography does exploit women and degrades women. However, why are you being sexist here and only including exploiting women? Can't men too be exploited? I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's also a thing called gay sex. There's also child prostitution. It's not just women.
And right then, a woman who was 2 rows up from us, she stood up and interrupted me, and she faced me and she said, she was probably in her 50s. She said, "Be quiet. No one cares." I could not believe that a woman of all people would stand up and tell me to be quiet. She didn't tell the man to stop looking at pornography. She didn't say anything about that. She just said no one cared that he was looking at pornography, what was likely child pornography.
No one would have cared if you hadn't have made a deal about it. But because you made a deal about it, it became a scene. And I'm curious to why you're so shocked that a woman of all people would say to you, "We don't care about a guy looking at pornography." After all, you just earlier mentioned about 2 lesbians whipping one another. So, of course there are women out there who support pornography and are in the pornography industry, or who do pornography, who are going to say, "We don't care about people like you." Who knows, maybe that older lady, which said to you, "We don't care," maybe she was a porn star. You never know.
On the airplane, right in front of all of us, she said to just let it go. Needless to say, I was speechless. For the rest of the flight, I could barely control myself. I know everyone was looking at me. I felt a million emotions, most of which were just disbelief and extreme sadness and hopelessness in the fight against pornography. I couldn't believe that a woman of all people, an older woman, wasn't on our side, didn't see anything wrong with the exploitation and degradation of women and likely children right then and there.
And please stop with all these assumptions. You can't say, well, it was likely child pornography. So the reason that you're trying to argue that it's child pornography, although you have no proof of this, is because if it's child pornography, it is illegal. If it's adult pornography, however, there's nothing nobody can do. And therefore, I believe that you're trying to allude and assume that this is child pornography, so therefore you can make a case against what this man was doing.
We know that pornography is so addictive, and that man was likely very addicted to pornography. That's why he was looking at porn right then, that early. He couldn't help it. I feel really bad for him. Part of me does.
See, here you go with these assumptions again. It's true that pornography can be very addictive, but just because he's looking at pornography at 6 a.m. in no way means that he's addicted to it. There are plenty of people who are not addicted to pornography, yet look at pornography maybe once or twice a week simply to get a sexual release from it. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong or right, although I personally believe it's wrong, But to assume that he's a pornography addict simply because you saw him looking at pornography is like saying, well, somebody smoking a cigarette for once means that they're addicted to nicotine, or that someone drinking a beer means that they're automatically an alcoholic. That's not necessarily true, and it's wrong to make that assumption.
Just because I understand that he must be struggling with these urges, and I'm sure that he doesn't. He's not happy, and he doesn't want that, but it hurt even more that a woman would tell me that people don't care about this. It's a danger to children, pornography, especially if kids were going to be exposed to it on an airplane. It is no place for pornography on an airplane. I feel like even most porn users would agree that pornography is there's no place for pornography on an airplane.
Now this is where I actually agree with you on something. I made a video a while back, like a month or two ago, titled Pornography in the Library, where I talked about witnessing somebody look at pornography. It was like this homeless dude. I walked in the library and there was this homeless dude dressed disgustingly, but he was on one of the public libraries looking at pornography, and I was surprised by this, but I wasn't completely shocked about it. But I went up to the library clerk person and I asked her, do you know that person looking at pornography over there, is that even allowed? And they said that there's nothing that they can do about it because it is a public place, and unless that man is looking at child pornography, it's his right to exercise that freedom to look at pornography. I mean, it's a public library, it's a public place, and unless they're looking at child pornography, a guy or girl is perfectly allowed to look at pornography on a public computer. Likewise, in this instance of a plane, there's no rules against it. It's a public place. The guy's using his own iPad, which he bought. Therefore, he's able and freely able to exercise his right to look at pornography. Now, do I agree with that, exercising that right to look at pornography in public places, especially a library where you have young kids like 4, 5, and 6? I used to go to the library when I was young, 4, 5, and 6. I used to do reading contests. And quite personally, I think it's wrong to have pornography allowed in a public library, especially when you have those young ages. Likewise, I think I could make the same argument for planes, although planes don't necessarily have super young children between the ages of 3 to 7, unlike libraries. Libraries are more predominant for that type of thing. But I can understand, and I do agree, that I don't believe pornography is a place for an airplane, especially if there are children around.
A wealth of research today demonstrates that pornography consumption is the leading cause for sexual violence and sexual assault. This is a safety hazard also in a public place as tight and small as an airplane.
Hey, could you please cite your sources right here? If you're going to claim statistics like this, I believe they need to be backed up so you can have some credibility in what you're saying. But other than your simple words, I can't go off of what you're saying unless you have some sources to back it up. I'm sorry.
We can't have that. I just wanted to share this experience with you all. Have you experienced pornography on an airplane? Is this a common danger to us? I mean, I'm involved every day in the fight against pornography, and I did not realize that there's a danger to us on airplanes in the United States. I got off the airplane and I reported it to a police officer who promised to investigate. He went to the man's next gate, especially because the likelihood that it was child pornography was pretty high.
Again, you're trying to argue that it was child pornography, and I honestly, sincerely doubt that it was, but I can't argue that it wasn't. However, you can't argue that it was like you're attempting to do here.
But he said that if it was adult pornography, there was nothing that he could do because the Delta and many other airlines have no policy about this kind of content on their flights. Needless to say, airlines need to have a policy. It needs to be spelled out that obscenity and pornography is not allowed on the airplanes. This is a danger to all passengers, to flight attendants. It would be a very unhealthy working place.
I would not go as far as to say that it's a danger, but I do think that area in which the person's looking at pornography is a very inappropriate place for that conduct to be happening. But I don't consider it a danger like you're trying to allude.
Workplace, that would be sexual harassment anywhere else.
Wait, what? Sexual harassment? Do you know what sexual harassment is? I quote, "Sexual harassment is intimidation, bullying of a sexual nature, or the unwelcome or inappropriate promise of rewards in exchange for sexual favors." I don't understand how this man, or what your situation that happened, is in any way sexual harassment. Maybe if he grabbed his iPad with the pornography on it and then started to shove it in your face like, "Look at the pornography! Look at the pornography! Look at the pornography! Look at the pornography!" Maybe that would be considered sexual harassment. But again, I don't know where you're pulling this sexual harassment idea from, because he's not promising any rewards in exchange for sexual favors or anything like that. So, again, I don't know where you're pulling this from.
Anyway, I just wanted to share this with you. If you have experienced something similar, please let us know. We're no doubt going to investigate this further and work to get anti-pornography policies in place on airplanes, trying to make them a little bit safer in regards to the availability of porn and the exploitation of women. We have to stop this.
I agree with your last point. We do need to stop the exploitation of women. However, I want to call you out on a key point here. What about the exploitation of men? Why are you being sexist in this video? You act as if it's one whole side of the debate. You know, you're just like... But what you're saying in this video, the exploitation of women, you're just like the feminists. See, the feminists hold the view that domestic violence is a female problem. That domestic violence is only against them, when in reality, domestic violence is against men and women. However, the media, and the news, and feminists wash it over and say that domestic violence is violence only against women. And that's wrong. Domestic violence is not a gender problem. It's a people problem. It happens on both sides towards men and women. But you rarely ever hear the man's side, because most of it goes unreported. And most people don't take domestic violence against men or women committing domestic violence on men seriously. And you are being sexist in this video. The exploitation of women, child pornography, men, young men, get into that stuff too. Sex trafficking is a real issue. It's wrong. It's disgusting. It's not just women. It's also young men. So please, wake up. And if you're truly a speaker against sex trafficking and underage pornography, child pornography, you need to realize that it's both genders here. Don't favor one gender over the other. But most of all, don't be like a feminist, please, and say that domestic violence is a gender problem. It only applies to females. Child pornography only applies to females. Wake up! Gosh, I hate people being sexist. Again, I am in no way promoting or supporting pornography. I am actually against it personally. However, even still, I believe this woman was extremely misled and was very deceptive in how she presented her story. So with that said, I'm Mr. Repzion, also known as Daniel Silsbach. Peace the Rep out.